Wake up. It's over. Jasper. I missed the whole darn thing. Slept late, woke up to the phone ringing, was completely oblivious. In fact, I was pissed that the phone was ringing because it was before noon and it was the house line, which meant it probably wasn't for me. I had 2 weeks before I had to go back to school, and I'd been planning to spend those 2 weeks sleeping. And when I wasn't sleeping, I was planning to nap. So I would have had the machine pick it up, only I'd unplugged the machine a couple of nights before when someone was leaving a message that I couldn't deal with. Something about getting out the vote. Blah, 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 blah. The only way I could think to shut it up was to pull out the plug. I was maybe a little drunk at the time, so it made sense then. But now the phone was ringing for the 11th time, and I realized if it was important and I didn't get it, my parents would find out and I'd be wading knee deep in the poop. So I stumbled out of bed in my boxers and yelled at the phone to hold on. I was coming. It was still ringing when I got there, and I was a little surprised when I picked it up and said hello, and my mom started saying, "Thank God it was me. Thank God I was okay." My first reaction was, what the heck have the neighbors been telling her? And did they really call Korea to let her know I was drinking so much? And then my father was on the phone too, and he was saying they were watching CNN and it was just terrible, completely terrible, and it had taken forever for them to get through. I had to say I had no idea what he was talking about, and then, only then, did he say, "Did we wake you?" And I wasn't going to lie. I said, yeah, they had, so this whole phone call wasn't making much sense to me. And that's when he told me the World Trade Center was gone. That's how he said it. The World Trade Center is gone. And I honestly thought, does he mean Grandma? Because that's why he and Mom were in Korea in the first place. But obviously, I was wrong on that count because Grandma was fine. And just all these other people who were dead. As he was telling me this, I walked over to the window and gee whiz, even from Park Slope you could see that something completely hellish had happened. There was all this smoke billowing up from downtown, and the Twin Towers were nowhere to be found. Holy crud, I said. I mean, holy crud. This was probably the first time I'd ever cursed while talking to my parents, but they didn't reprimand me. Mom was saying she wished she could be with me, that they would try to get home on the first available plane. I asked them what else was going on in the city, and my dad couldn't resist it. He said, "For once in your life, turn on the news." So I took the phone into the other room and turned on the TV. And it was amazing to see what was going on practically next door to me. It was totally surreal that I'd slept through it all. My parents were telling me to go to the grocery and stock up on water and canned goods like Brooklyn was going to be under siege at any minute. I said yes to everything I said, and then when my mother started crying, I told her I was going to be fine, that I knew how to take care of myself, which is why they left me alone here in the first place. This made her cry even more, the idea of me being left alone, and I assured her I still had a lot of friends who hadn't headed back to college yet. And if I needed somewhere to go, there were plenty of places I could crash. When that wasn't enough, I even said I'd take my cell phone with me so she could reach me whenever. This made her quiet down a little, and my father said it was probably time for them to go and that I shouldn't hesitate to call them if anything went wrong. For one stupefying moment, he was quiet, and I actually thought he was going to say he loved me or something out of control like that. But as usual, he left that to Mom, who, also as usual, overcompensated. Although, in a situation like this, when your only son is almost 7,000 miles away from you and his city's under terrorist attack, I guess there's no such thing as overdoing it. After I hung up, I sat on the couch in my boxers and watched more of the news, and all I could keep thinking was, holy crud, holy crud. Once I'd gotten a grasp on what was going on, and I was reassured that terrorists wouldn't be storming over the Brooklyn Bridge anytime soon, or ramming a plane into it for that matter, I decided to check my email. Lo and behold, it seemed that every single person I'd met in college, as well as a few I'd met before college, had emailed me to see if I was okay. I guess they didn't know anyone else in New York City, or they didn't know that I lived in Brooklyn, or they were worried that I had gotten up early to check out the observation deck. Thinking about the observation deck suddenly made me really sad. We always had relatives visiting from Korea, so we'd go and do the touristy things that most Brooklynites never do. I love being up that high in the clouds. Sometimes I would always run to the east side of the building, even when I was older, to try to look out the window and see our house. I never saw it, but I swore I'd come close a couple of times. Some of the people who emailed me said I was in their prayers, and while that was a nice thing for them to say, I wanted to tell them their prayers could probably be redirected to more deserving people. But then I realized they had no idea whether I was dead or alive, so I basically responded to each and every one of them, saying I was fine, and that the city would be fine, and that I appreciated their concern. I didn't mention that I'd slept through the whole thing, and I definitely didn't mention I was alone, because from the sound of some of the messages, I would have had a prayer circle on my doorstep in 10 seconds. Oops, sorry. Flat, just to take care of me. Even some of my high school friends, who were already back at college, emailed me to say how weird it was to be away, hoping things weren't too crazy back home. I sent them back the same email saying I was okay, but I couldn't give them any real details since all I knew was from TV. And it was probably the same thing they were watching in Chicago or Colorado or California. There was one email from a guy named Peter, subject, tonight. And I blanked at first until I realized it was the guy I'd met at Mitchell's party Saturday night, who I was supposed to meet to go see Hedwig and the Angry Inch later in the day. He was a high school senior, which at first I wasn't sure about. But heck, I was only 2 years older, and he was cute. So I'd say a date would be cool. Now he was saying, Jasper, this is Peter from the party. With everything that's happening, I hope you're all right. I just got home from school. It was crazy. Since it's looking like all the subways are out, I'm guessing our movie plans are off. I guess we can see how the week goes. I was really excited to see you. I know, I'm not supposed to say that, but I promise I'll still be excited whenever we reschedule. If I have to walk across the bridge to get to your borough, so be it. Again, I hope you and your family are okay. Talk soon, Peter. It was a little bit much for before a first date, but I emailed back to say, yeah, we'd reschedule. Normally, I would have taken a day or two to respond just so he wouldn't think I was eager or needy, but the whole notion that he might think I was dead or something made me figure it was better to write sooner rather than later. Even though the news was saying phone service was spotty, my phone was working fine. I called Amanda, this girl who went to my school, who also lived in Park Slope, and I asked her what was up, and she said she was going down to the hospital to give blood. I said, yeah, that was the right thing to do, and if she could wait a few minutes for me to put on some clothes, I'd go with her. She said sure, and I told her I'd pick her up. In the shower, all my mind could do was wander back to, holy crud. I was afraid to check the news again because what if this was just the beginning? What if there were more planes coming down or bombs about to go off? I had to imagine Brooklyn was pretty safe, except for the bridge. We were pretty much devoid of symbolic targets. It was hard to imagine terrorists getting excited about the Wonder Wheel on Coney Island. Still, even though I lived in Brooklyn, Manhattan was the reason I loved being from the city. The idea of it disappearing was pretty dire. I knew there was no way to get there right now except by foot, and there was no reason to go, but part of me wanted to trek there anyway just to help it out. By the time I was fully awake and fully dressed, I had already seen the news loop around at least 3 times. I'd seen the replays, so many replays, from so many angles, of the second plane hitting, of the towers falling, of the Pentagon burning, and I kept looking out the window. I kept seeing the smoke, but nothing, and I mean nothing, compared to stepping outside. It was one of the things that